if we're not going to be able to fund the project entirely, then we're going to look at inflation. Lately, we've been looking at about 15% per year as a safe guideline for if we're planning for a project that's 5 years out, we're going to take that estimate and increase it by 15%. That can also be impacted by tariffs, any new federal mandates on where materials need to be sourced from, and then economic impacts as availability of contractors, what construction can actually be done, how it changes. Ideally, once we get that estimate, about 10 to 20% of that is usually your design phase. So once we can get a design, usually you run from about 15%, which is your conceptual design, to 35, 65, and 95. And it's not really until after that 65% that you have a greater detail of what's going to happen. And at the 95, you're generally looking at a plan that's going to be issued for construction. If we were to have something like that, once you have that, you can break it down into essentially a worksheet schedule. From that point, you're looking at cost of materials, labor hours, what's going to be required. And that's where you really fine tune a budget for a project. But we're generally not going to get to that point at this early phase if it's a new project. So once we have those established, that allows us to refine the budget. And then the biggest thing that's going to detract from that budget from that point on is any kind of scope creep.
Thanks, Mark. So one important thing to note there is that our largest, most expensive projects that we do have to accumulate funding for over a period of years are the most at risk of being impacted by inflation. And so, and the Assembly's seen that before, and I'm sure they'll see it again, but that's when you'll end up seeing capital projects that everybody thought was already funded have additional requests for funding. So the next thing we're going to talk about is what our approved capital appropriation listing tells us. So this listing includes projects with approval and contingent approval. Approved capital appropriations include projects that have been authorized through the annual budget or through supplemental appropriations. That approval gives staff the ability to move a project forward, but it does not always mean that the project's ready for immediate construction. So projects that you see on this listing may be in a design or pre-construction phase. They may be phased over multiple years, have appropriations set aside as potential match for grants we're pursuing, or be pending updated cost estimates. So this is not what it looks like where you're used to seeing it, because it's usually separated by fund, but this is a summarized view of the capital appropriations approved through the adopted FY 2026 budget. So you can see the same thing in that packet if you want to, then broken down by fund. It reflects cumulative approvals across many years and many project stages. So these totals don't actually represent available cash or project progress. The best way to see how much funding is actually left on each of our projects is by reviewing the interim financial statements. So we generally talk about two main sources funding sources when discussing capital capacity. So our undesignated working capital is more flexible, but it also supports day-to-day operations and emergencies, whereas the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund is restricted by code for governmental infrastructure purposes. So this slide shows a snapshot of undesignated working capital by fund based on the interim FY 2025 financial statements. This is again summarized, but you can find this exact information on each of the balance sheets in the interim financial statements. These balances do not reflect any FY 2026 supplementals or other post-adoption changes. Some funds do show a negative balance due to timing differences, so that typically means costs have been incurred before related funding is received. So with something especially like the airport fund, there's often fairly significant delays between when we are actually spending money and then getting reimbursed for those pieces. Then we get to the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund, and this fund is restricted by municipal code for the repair and replacement of general fund infrastructure, things like buildings, streets, sidewalks, parking lots, and parks. The way the money gets into that fund is through an annual transfer from the general fund at the end of the fiscal year. That transfer amount is calculated using criteria established in code. It comes forward to the Assembly in September of each year as a recommendation from the administrator. Annual use of the fund is recommended by staff through the budget process, and Assembly adoption of the budget is what provides us with that approval. For context, $3.2 million was transferred into the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund in FY25, and the current fund balance is a little bit over $4 million. So this presentation represents the starting point of the capital planning process. Additional information and refinements will be developed by staff and brought forward over the coming months. Several people have already made comments about this, but this is super early. So it's too early for most of our budget draft pieces to be developed. And so it's a good time to have these preliminary conversations. Next month, the Assembly will be presented with the resource proposal forms from staff. It is also important to note that the cost estimates for unfunded or deferred projects that you see on that mid to long range capital improvement program, they're preliminary and they get updated as projects are reviewed and prioritized. We did our best for this meeting to make sure that the most pressing ones were updated, but there are plenty with pretty old estimates on there. And some final notes. You've made it to the end of my presentation. Just a couple of other things. So if the Assembly takes no action tonight, staff will continue developing the capital plan as part of the draft budget based on all the tools that I talked about tonight. This meeting, again, is just the start of the process, and there will be multiple opportunities for Assembly input and legislative action throughout the budget process.
Great, thank you. I don't think your PowerPoint was too wordy at all. I think it gives us something great to refer back to as this process develops, because while this budget process is a conversation we've had multiple times, this exact conversation is not. So I think it is very valuable. There's definitely a lot of numbers, and like I said, it is very early in this process. A lot of numbers to digest and go through. I may have some stuff as we develop a conversation as a team, but don't initially on this one. And tonight, Assembly, we can be a little bit more free-flowing. Just if we have questions, comments, let's not interrupt each other, but if we have stuff, let's please have a conversation about this. Katie.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I know that the Assembly put away a big chunk, that 3.2 million, I think, in the Public Sinking Infrastructure Fund, so there was only like 800,000 in it. How much was it spent down, or what does it usually sit at? Because I remember that being quite a large number that was put in it. Like how much was spent in the last year?
I have those, I just have to dig them out of my folder. So, for FY25, the transfer to the general fund from the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund was $3,978,000. That was 25. For 26, that I did not grab from the printer, but I can pull up on my computer. That's great. I believe it was pretty comparable. It was between $3.5 and $4 million for 26 as well.
So we spend like almost that much every year out of the, like, give or take $800,000.
Not every single year. The last couple of years it has built up before, but I think in the 6 or 7 years I was looking at it, I think the most I saw it get to was about 8 or 9 million. And I think part of that had to do actually with COVID. I think there was some budget changes during that period that meant that less money was being appropriated for capital projects.
Thank you.
Brooke, I do have a question for you. We see a lot of the costs on this side, but have you been able to estimate rate increases for each fund yet? We have the costs, but we don't see that side of it.
No, not yet. So our staff deadline for their operating budgets, we just are hitting that tomorrow, I believe, if I remember my own deadlines. So we'll use that as well as the information that comes from those resource proposals. Part of what comes through the resource proposals is actually small capital projects as well. So we have to take those into account when I look at updating the fiscal models and kind of generate those.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, like, this one's kind of presented as assembly if you want to change capital projects in order to affect rates, here's what you need. If we did a reverse process and I said, electric department gets no more than a 3% rate increase this year, can you go back and then change all of this with that high guidance?
Yes, I can.
So that might be an easier way for us if we don't have an appetite for the rate increases, because I can't prioritize with the risk matrix and everything. Like, that's not my purview, right? But I think I could set what I feel a public appetite for a rate increase would be, also understanding that anything less than recommended by department heads is going to put us in a more deferred maintenance type situation.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to confirm what you're saying. I feel like the public would really like a break this year. We've been going, good percent increases for several years now, and I'm not saying we do this permanently, but this year I would like to see a lower rate increase if possible.
Yeah, I think we're in year 3, the last year of the kind of 3-year planned one. So I agree the community would like to see that. It is on our strategic plan as well, but there was some important decisions that were done to set ourselves up for some of these high risk items. So I wouldn't want to see all that work go the wayside either. I think something that we can do as the Assembly on this scoring matrix is add to that reputation column. I mean, we don't really know the personal safety and compliance reliability aspects of stuff, but reputation. What is it like to have, our Lincoln Street not meet ADA? What is it like for, people to be tripping on the curves in our central business district? Catley-Ann, I think in that column 4 is the highest. Is that correct for reputation?
I see a 5.
I see a 5. 5? Okay. Reputation goes to 5. I think we could do some helpful work there in that risk score. The other questions I have, I don't know, Brooke, if someone else knows more, but what's the, I guess, flavor of a maintenance project versus capital? What's the distinction there? How is that decided?
So something that's a capital project would add life to an asset. For maintenance, what you're doing is making sure that that asset can last as long as it was supposed to in the first place. Does that make sense?
So I believe adding sand to a ball field was maintenance. Okay. But it wouldn't extend the life of the flat ground.
Items that are like land improvements are the ugly, even for accountants. It's a little bit harder to talk about what makes land last longer, but yes, technically that sand we do not consider to make the field itself last longer, just get it toward the end of its life. But what is the end of a field's life? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess
if the idea of setting a set rate increase, I think we should be a little careful there. It sounds nice, but I think we need to look at what that means before we say that. I mean, it's okay to say that is our target, but we could be cutting something that means that the lights turn off. If that, that becomes much less reliable. I mean, I'm using that as probably not a very good example, but we need to make sure that we're not being penny wise and pound foolish there. And I guess it also makes a difference as to what enterprise fund we're talking about. Because what was last year that we didn't have much of an electric rate hit increase? It was the year before, I think.
It was smaller. There was a rate increase last year, but it was smaller.
What's that? It was a very small one though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But other funds are in much more need. So to say we're going to restrict everything to 3% is dangerous because some funds are in the negative and we don't have that buffer and others do. So I can see that saying that as a target, but we can't, not without transferring money from the general fund to some of these enterprise funds, and maybe that's what we decide we want to do. But I think we want to be careful to look at what we're actually doing before, and just say 3% only is not safe.
I mean, that's not what I'm saying. I don't think that's what the mayor was saying. That's why we're asking them. If we ask them to look into it, I think they can come back and bring us some options. I don't think anyone wants to, have things falling apart or what have you. I would just like to see less of increases. I know that I'd like to see them less across the board, but I understand, I am aware that the funds besides just the electric are low. So I know it's hard to find that balance. Yeah, because someone mentioned to me too, we've been doing rate increase by increase. You take $100, 5% $100, then next year it's 5% of that one and that one and that one. It compounds. And so I do want them to look at it. I would like to see if they can look at it and find out if we can do that. We have been increasing over the past several years, 7, 8 years, for quite a bit, and for a good reason. But I think it's not going to hurt to look at it, see what we can do.
Yeah, I can agree with that, Kevin. I think we've been very generous on our rate increases for the fund itself. And I think this time I'm 51% on tightening that and 49% on making sure the funds continue to be solvent as is, right? So my thought would be, maybe you're not going to have quite as much this year. If we can go from a 6 to a 5, it would be much appreciated. And if we could articulate that we started out needing an 8, but we got it down to a 6, I think that can help the process along a lot too. Because if we're simply presented with a 5, not knowing where we started at, that still seems great. But if the request and the need was a 10%, we can say that there was work to get it down. Yeah, I definitely don't want to cork capital plans either. I want my toilet, I want the sewer to go away when I flush the toilet. But I agree, Kevin, they're cumulative, and they, it's kind of like when you invest in the stock market for years and years and years, and all of a sudden you have a big amount of money. Well, that's what our utility bills are right now. John?
Thanks, Mayor. I think this is great conversation. I think everybody's seeing how these two things are linked so closely together. And I hear you loud and clear with, if we can take breaks on the rate increases, absolutely. And I think getting the knowledge out there, the information out there for everyone to understand that sometimes it is an inevitability, right? We have to keep the infrastructure alive. And if there is a scale back in one year and a bump up the next year, as long as there's some way that we're we're tracking along with what normal inflationary costs look like. I always hate to look in the past, right? And I don't want it to come across the wrong way, but we've seen the effects, and other communities have seen the effects too. I think everybody probably saw the news from Ketchikan about 6 months ago, and they were very large double-digit rate increases in their utility. And it's because if you keep them low for so long, or not make adjustments to them for so long, and I know I've probably drawn this graph for most of you if you've been in my office, if you keep them low for so long, and then the cost of maintaining it keeps going up, if you're not tracking along that line, you create that void there, and that void is all that lost revenue, which equals deferred maintenance. And that deferred maintenance will eventually get to that point where the infrastructure fails. So you're weighing that risk of, do I want to run it to failure and assume that cost is going to be lower than what it would have been if we had maintained it throughout that period of time. So it's good conversation for everybody to hear that balance that we're trying to maintain.
John, were you ever able to tell that to Valerie?
We've discussed it before.
I think, John, what you're saying is, I think we all understand, everyone on here, the rates, in Sitka were very low for quite a long period of time. And I'm not blaming anyone in the past assemblies, because you just don't know, But now, because of us having to catch up, and then with all the inflation all these years, that's why we're trying to do this. I'm just hoping to balance it a little bit and give people a break, but I understand. We need to be careful with this.
Brooke, you had something to add?
There is one thing I kind of want to talk about up front. For wastewater, we have a regulatory compliance related project that we're required to do. It's a very, very expensive project. We are attempting to get grant funding for that project, but it does require a match. And so wastewater is a fund that would be significantly impacted by foregoing a rate increase, because we do have a timeline that we have to get that project completed by.
And is that listed here as
Yes, it's under wastewater. It's called effluent disinfection.
Okay. So we will be funding in this upcoming year 2.6 million?
If the congressionally directed, spending? Authorization comes through.
Okay. Okay, so that's the bulk of what we're looking to do, and that's perhaps why there's no money in that Catley-Ann Street one?
Yes, that ended up bumping pretty much everything else.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, because if we look here at that risk score, it said 56 is a perfect score for not goodness. And it's not good in water, wastewater, or the general fund portion. So if I were to make one comment tonight, I said we'd find a way to even just put $50,000 aside for that Catley-Ann Road project, because, yeah. And Lincoln Street too, some bit of money there, and we had a special meeting about that over the summer. I don't remember the exact direction we gave, but it was an important project, and I want us to remember that once we come to the money side of this year. Is there a opportunity to include GPIP in this mid to long range capital improvement plan?
Yes, that would be, it's a newer thing, so there's not been, we haven't made 100% of the updates yet for GPIP, but it needs its own piece now.
Yeah.
It's the haul out.
It is, yes. And what about making other things that are ongoing out there, the seaplane base? I know we're trying to grant funding, but there's probably going to be a match. Is that airport fund enterprise? Okay. So in seeing that listed here would be helpful, but I think airport was one of the ones you hadn't gotten to yet. So will that pop up on this list?
So the airport does not have any designated working capital. Like with this terminal improvement project, it has wiped out all of that funds. Money would take a while to build up on its own. The seaplane base is in the design phase. I know that they are working on applying for further grant funding. There will end up being match that we'll end up having to talk about.
Okay.
Not tonight, but once we have more information about what that looks like.
And at this early stage, it's a good opportunity to say, okay, now we're bringing on this new asset. It's going to be triple the size of our existing facility, if I recall, and yet we get $100 a month from a person to park a plane in a city facility. So the operational side is not what we're speaking about tonight, but that does have to come into play once we do these capital projects. Like, how are we going to sustain it? It's a lesson we're learning from the airport, so to be able to apply it so quickly to its cousin, yeah, I don't think $100 a month is enough.
Question.
Oh, go ahead. You
I have a question about the public works projects and those 56 scores. Like, so you've got the unfunded mandate, very expensive. Doing that, 2.6 million. Is that what the cost of it is, or is it more?
That's the match.
Okay. And then, why does Lakehurst and Monastery Kincaid rank like higher in funding? Why is it funded over these ones of more need? As well as the ones below it.
Good evening again. Mark, CV Public Works Director. So specifically with those projects, my understanding is that prior to my arrival at some point that there were multiple fatalities on Cat Leanne, and that is why it is scored at a 56, because that puts it happened, so the likelihood it did happen, and the multiple puts it at the 8, so we hit 56 as the highest score. I have not changed those because I don't want to say that the past did not happen, but I think as we reevaluate, we need to look at whether or not the condition of the road was a direct causal factor in those, and I don't know that it is, so I haven't changed it. But that being said, we had Lakehurst Monastery Kincaid as a previously funded project. It's one that was brought forward. We put it out to bid. We did not have sufficient funds, so we are in the process of awarding a phase 1 for that project. And while we have contractors mobilized, I'd like to get the phase 2 portion of that completed since we're already working in that area. One of the critical parts of that project is the Monastery and Kincaid portion. We've had a lot of failures for the water lines on the Monastery side. The phasing of the project, since it's a gravity sewer for a lot of that, we need to set the lake lower side first. So as we're setting that side, we're phasing the project in the way that it should be. We're not getting to the critical need for the project. So that's where we're trying to get that project funded right now.
And what about the other 3 that aren't those? Maksudov, Kirkman?
So those also have significant portions of the budget already allocated. We're just trying to top it up to the final so that they can be executed.
So the choice is like actually executing something over...
Trying to execute a project, or do we put a small amount aside towards a project that we know is multiple years out?
That you won't be able to complete.
Right. So if we look at the current Cat Leanne project, the estimate is around, I want to say 16 million. So
For
there's-
everything?
For
the
everything. So
wastewater?
you're breaking down into general fund water and wastewater. And we have, if I remember, maybe around 6 in that project. And when you look at Lincoln Street, our estimate for that one is about 15.5, and I believe we have about 10 million in that one, if I'm remembering a number. So I think on Lincoln Street, we're at a point now where we could, if we want to go forward with a design that we can move forward with a design. We have the funding allocated to do that. I think Cat Leanne, we're not quite there. We've heard previously that Lincoln Street is a priority. We don't want to ignore that. So the plan right now is to put out an RFQ using the Safe Streets for All grant that's going to essentially look at our downtown corridor, and we're going to try and prioritize that happening first for all multimodal kinds of transportation. And that can help drive the decision making. But if we get that process started, then we can focus on downtown, hopefully start putting the rest of the funding away, get a better rough order of magnitude for Lincoln Street, execute that project first, and then continue to put funding away to execute the Cat-Leanne, recognizing that if we're going to change anything with Lincoln Street, if I've heard discussions of potential portions being one way or changing the street to one way, if we do that, that's going to change the traffic impacts on Cat-Leanne, it's going to change the traffic impacts at Harbor. So we'd like to comprehensively look at that whole downtown corridor using that grant, and then prioritize the Lincoln Street project, and then move into the Cat-Leanne project.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. You may have said this before, but can you please just, you don't have to go long, but kind of briefly encapsulate the effluent system thing that we're going to be, so we're required by the feds. This is
So there's an
obviously,
unfunded mandate for additional disinfection of the effluent before it is basically released back into the ocean. That is a condition of our new permit. We have a waiver to gain compliance with that permit by the fall of 2030. So we've already put funding into the project to work through the first initial phases of design, looked at potential options to gain compliance, selected one of those options, selected a method of not building a brand new facility, but adding on to our wastewater treatment plant with the disinfection portion. And we put in for the congressionally delegated spending item, and we've got a rough order of magnitude for the cost of that. So that 2.6 million that's in there is what we would have to appropriate if we got a fully funded federal budget and that line item is approved and we get the CDS request, we would need to be able to come up with that match funding.
okay, so this is just, it's technically hasn't been needed for years, just something the government said we have to do, and so we're doing it.
Yes, this is a new unfunded federal requirement.
Yeah, and Kevin, we've been, fighting is not the correct word, but when me and John go back to DC, this is always, it's been a huge point of us talking to them for quite some time. We've actually delayed it for a significant amount of time already, and we're one of the few communities still operating under this waiver, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did our best, but we finally hit the end of the road where I don't think it's worth going round and round anymore.
Yeah, I understand. It's just hard, maybe for the people in the public who are listening, this is just one of those things, we can't not do it. So I do appreciate you and John and whatever else staff trying to extend that, give us a little more time. Thank you.
For my own deal, for in 2004, I think we had 2 years of the collaboration, working over stuff in the community here, met once a month. And one of those things were that what we pump out of our wastewater is 26,000 times more dirty than what cruise ships pump out. And so now in 2025 with this device, you got any idea how much closer we'll be to what, cleaned up effluent goes out in comparison to what it's been and this waiver that we utilize?
I don't have the exact numbers, but I can look at getting the actual permit requirements if there's a new listed requirement for the disinfection as it's pumped out.
Because back in the day, that's where we were really worried about an oyster farm going into Whiting Harbor, and then we watched the DEC give those guys the okay, and then they lost their life savings trying to make it work from stuff swimming around out there.
And essentially, we're going to be doubling the chlorination of the treatment for our wastewater going through. It's kind of a post-treatment now, and we'll have treatment on both sides as it comes through the plant.
Scotty, my understanding in layman's terms, the water we're going to be pumping into the ocean will be cleaner than the ocean itself. So that's the new standard.
Which is
Because
concerning.
it's near a harbor.
Is that right? That it should be like that? I'm wondering what collaboration with the tribe has looked like in the past on any capital improvement projects, and if there is an opportunity there. Just don't have a great understanding of it, but they have a roads inventory. Tribal transportation is usually a significant source of funding for many tribes, and so I'm wondering what communication between our two governments looks like, and if there has been any overlap, considering that one of the things you look at is like grants and timing and stuff. Have discussions with them happened, and has that impacted the progress or viability of any project at any given time in the past or in the future?
I can't speak to all the history. In my time, I've only attended one of the transportation meetings with the STA's transportation liaison, and then they had left. We did meet, I believe it was earlier this week. I can't remember when that meeting was. And I do have a point of contact that I'm going to be reaching out to for the Kirkman project. Kirkman Way it's kind of listed as a road, but it's not really a road. It's an easement that is used as access to get to some properties that don't have any other access, and that's one of the projects we have in here, is to work on the water and the stormwater coming through that. So we'll be reaching out to the tribe to coordinate on that project.
And so just today at lunch, at the senior, right here at the senior thing, tribal people told me that they want to splice in to the expense at Kirkman Way by exploring grants that they feel that they can get to. And Ms. Guthrie is the person I was directed to try to find to get us together. So I was going to try to make that happen with the communication to try to coincide with their opportunities and try, because Kirkman Way really leads to the education of the institution of whatever, discrimination against Tlingit properties. At this, the reason that they started all these restricted deeds is from the city of Sitka ripping off the Tlingit people, not from what federal did around. So that easement that comes down, I have pictures of that day that Paxton Manor closed access. That used to be a road that paralleled like the road that Alps is on, it used to come right down there. And that's why that easement never got squared away, because people were gonna lose what property they have. And then it became a no man's land. And one of the houses there still has 1940 water bringing it to it as a result of discrepancies. So I really applaud you for even saying it on the air that you guys are going to Kirkman Way, because it needs it bad. Thank you.
To help answer your question, yes, we have regular sessions with STA. I think they're monthly. Yeah, I know we have a quarterly one where the mayor and the tribal chair, and I'm in there also with the STA CEO. But our monthly meetings, it's typically us, the transportation group, BIHA is there, the economic development director from the tribe is in there, and we discuss things just like that. What grants are out there, what projects need to happen in the transportation front, things on infrastructure, and if there are areas where we can share notes and collaborate, we take advantage of them.
Just in terms of if we're given priorities, that's the appropriate thing to do here. I would love to lean into that. I know that that's happening, and that's great to hear. But that definitely, I would love to see it continue. I'd love to see it be strengthened and do what we can do there to increase communications and collaboration. I think there's a lot of shared opportunity, especially as they're considering some pretty significant infrastructure developments on Siganaka and somewhere else. It might mainly be on Siganaka that they're doing the transportation facility, but also they're planning for the natural resources build out. So just as much as we can work together there, I think that could benefit our community and hopefully Catley Street as well.
Yeah, on that topic, Safe Streets for All maybe has like an advisory board or advisory group possibility. It's been an not an unfunded mandate, a legislative priority from the tribe to the city to be involved in the planning for Lincoln Street and Catley. So having them participate in some capacity in that grant-funded planning program of Safe Streets for All would be a good way to kind of achieve all of those things, if possible. And with the new strategic plan item of, let's just touch something once. Thank you for aligning the lift station on Lincoln Street with the Lincoln Street paving project. That just makes sense if we're going to be addressing it. Let's just do it there. It is a very prominent location. right there in the corner. Is there an opportunity to put it underground or wrap it with something nice, use some visitor money to make it not just be rocks on the outside?
Could you just, what were you referencing?
The
couldn't hear it.
corner here, Lake and Lincoln, the building right next to the bathrooms.
Oh, okay, got it. I just didn't know if I could.
And it has stuff inside of it that moves our wastewater along. But it's a very prominent location. And if there's some opportunity there to use some visitor money to make the outside.
Let's do a gum wall. I'll start it.
Hey. Some cities have designated graffiti areas, so don't touch any of this. You can have this space. I really appreciate all of this. The more that I look at it, the more I just have gratitude towards the foresight that John had to hire an asset manager and build out this program, because we're just at a place in time where we built a lot of things 40 years ago, and here we are needing to address it. Perhaps not with the envisioned, partnership with the state at the time of original construction. So we need to do it kind of on our own 2 feet in many ways. And speaking of partnership with the state, the city-state building, it's represented here, but there's just a lot going on there, and potentially, losing one of the larger tenants in that building from the state side. It's just something we need to track and know that it might fully become ours in the near future. And a challenge has been figuring out are they going to split this cost? How does this work from their side? Is there any ongoing conversations with the state on if they wish to maintain occupancy?
There's been some one-way conversations. I think they're mostly coming from my side. No, you're right. That building is a challenge, and that one comes up a lot when we look at funding the projects we need to do. And if we keep pushing funding over there and not putting it to other things without the certainty that the state is going to work with us on getting those projects across the finish line every year, we're wondering whether or not we should forward fund. So I will say the attempts at conversations have been happening.
Thank you, and that's what we can do. I'm now liaison to the Ports and Harbor Commission, and we had a discussion recently about Plan B. Now that port wall, the bulkhead wall there by the Marine Services Center, and there the dock where the smaller cruise ships park is no longer going to be replaced. And I think I saw in the interim financial statement some moving of money around to do anodes and do other things to extend its life. But is there hopes or thoughts of what is going to be next there? Because the Port and Harbor Commission has some ideas of some short-term strategies to
I wouldn't say that confidently the port wall is not going to be redone. It is true that we returned the RAISE grant for a multitude of reasons. One is the project cost went very high. We tried to put it out to bid with a cap, didn't get any responses. We were running out of time on the grant. We also had to wait a period of time to get those basically a formal removal from the program because we were holding on to some match money. And then, planning on what the future looks like, needing that match money to do a more robust plan. We're still having conversations on, okay, what do we want to do with this now, knowing that we have some choices. We could rescope it, come up with better cost estimates, go back and ask for another. I think they're build grants now. They're not raise anymore. We've gone to Tiger, to build, to raise, to back to build. But there is also the option of trying again with new numbers, which will raise the match amount. So we have to be very careful on what we're going to do with it, but there are some preventative maintenance things we can do that maybe extend the life a little bit. I hate to say it because I don't want it to go out in the news the wrong way, but it was, 6 years ago, I think it came before the assembly on a sell versus rehab decision on the Marine Service Center. I wouldn't say that that's completely off the table either. Part of the reason with getting that raise grant at the time was we'll put some money into it, we'll keep it as this community asset, but we have to look at what is possible to see what the future of that building looks like.
Yes, and that is one of our healthier of funds at the moment. And that leads me into this next topic, is that the match, I believe, for the raise grant came from both harbors and marine services, but it seems like the maintenance stuff that's going in is just coming from harbors. So is there an opportunity to access some of the marine services funds money to kind of do some of the shorter term strategies there on the wall to keep it trugging along until we can do that replacement?
I'd also just like to highlight on that if there are any opportunities to collaborate with local entities to source funding to support that project, which I believe there may be. That should be a priority to explore before we explore selling it.
So okay, quick question. So I've been going down the list, and most of these are either self-explanatory or so far out of my wheelhouse, I have no idea, and I'll have to trust you. But there's, they make sense. They can tell. And, things like power pole replacement and standby generators. But what's a space utilization improvement for $500,000? That just struck me as like, the rest of them, I just don't know what it means. And
Which fund are you talking about? So I
The
can.
electrical department,
Okay.
page,
Big page or little page electric?
big page, electric. 500K, about right towards the bottom of the page.
Okay, thank you.
It just, everything else, I think, okay, makes sense. What the hell is that?
Good evening, my name is Ron Vincent, I'm the Electric Utility Director. That project specifically is supposed to be $30,000. I don't, there must have been a typo or a mistake. It is in our long-term plan that we provided last year, the big spreadsheet. That project is specifically guided towards, or focused on evaluating all of the parking spaces that we have, the garage, the shop, the office spaces, and making sure that we can kind of reorganize that in a way to better utilize it. There's been some talk in years past. In fact, one of the old capital plans had a plan. It was pretty significantly expensive. It was several $1 million to build a new shop to store some of the expensive equipment that we have. This would basically bring in somebody to help us figure out how to better utilize the space that we have before we go and spend several $1 million on a new shop. I believe it's $30,000 is supposed to be the corrected value on that.
That changes yours, I think, pretty dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah,
it
and
does.
I
So
believe
it's
those
30K. Okay.
rows must have gotten shifted off or something.
To err is human, but to really screw up, you need a computer. Okay, so that, wow, I just saved $500,000 on the budget. You guys.
Well, we saved a bunch of money. Thanks, Tor. We're done here. Let's go
Yeah.
home.
I just got to say this because it kind of applies to the other night when it said the airport was used with the panels that built the Marine Service Center. And then I look at the 2028 and they're going to be doing a whole building envelope again for a bunch of money. Well, it's really important that you guys understand that when that cold storage was built, that was built to prevent Ward's Cove from establishing a long line buying station here. And so when you read and take out the Freedom of Information Act and read the information about it in the city offices, you'll see that the city got $4.5 million to build that. They used $3.5 million, and then the mechanical aspects of the mistakes that were made with the electric defrost, with the panels. And then when you keep going through it, you'll see that through 27 meetings, industry got the public aspect of that public cold storage taken away. If you go to Petersburg's now, they were able to use their Stevens money for the original concept, which was to have 25% of that cold storage as a custom value pack processing area so skiff fishermen could pull up to the city wall and process and freeze their own fish. That got taken away, and then we've ended up with, there have been attempted lawsuits to get the knuckle crane that's there just so our FAS vessels could unload and then use it, and there's quite a bit to that city cold storage, and anyway, it's worth reading if you want to read something that we're still dealing with to this day. All the little side notes that staff put in there are really good.
Yeah, actually, to build on that, when I was on the assembly the very first time, I fought for that knuckle crane. That was my baby, and for just that reason, for frozen at sea. And we used to do, they'd come up and, I forget her name, fishermen wouldn't stop calling me till well, yeah, and that was the whole point. So as to why that crane was built.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the airport fund hadn't been updated yet by staff this coming year, so I'm not sure that those numbers will be there moving forward to the same degree. Because we were looking at adding, at our last meeting, the roofing part into that supplemental, which was grant covered. So I think that's to come. Yep, we got a nod from the man who knows, who's not eating his cookies when he comes up though. So. Yeah.
So yeah, I want to echo the thanks for the information. It's quite a lot to take in, and I think well laid out, and I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the fact that we don't just randomly choose things, right? Like there's a process that we go through to make sure that we're trying to address the most important things that we are working toward, as well as keeping an eye on the long term. So, this risk scoring strategies, a great way to explain to people why we're doing something and also why we're not right now moving forward with that. So it's great to see the effort that's gone into this, and it's very transparent as to how we ended up where we're at. And I appreciate that clarification of some of these projects that are already underway. Kind of moves them up a little bit because we want to make sure we finish them. And that's a comment that I'm starting to hear from people. They're starting to see more things happen and starting to see more things get done. And, that's been a knock on the city and the assembly for quite a while. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the process that you've gone through to bring these forward as a group. And I'll speak about the rate thing too. I think you guys, I think we're all on the same page that the rates have been moving up, and yes, we're trying to keep those trend lines going together. But sometimes there's going to be a conversation that needs to happen about, giving a little bit of a break and taking a little more risk maybe, just to make sure that we can take care of our community. So while I'm not prepared to say 3% is the number, or anything like that, I think I will be pretty squinty-eyed if the rates go up very far because, I think we need to be careful with people, how they're feeling and what the economics are doing. So I appreciate it. I like what I see here.
I just have a question about harbors. I thought that there was some more incremental work that was happening at harbors, but here it seems to be mostly long-range projects and saving up. Was I just mistaken, or Are there like electrical improvements happening?
So the harbors needs a pretty extensive update, and part of what we're dealing with is that the increase in costs for harbor project is honestly astounding. We've dealt with some really surprising updated estimates that we've received on some of those projects. There is already appropriated funding for, probably that's the electrical one that you're thinking of. That wouldn't be on here because I believe that project was fully funded. So it would be on the appropriated projects listing.
And then just the other thing that I'll say about rate increases is I obviously haven't been involved in discussions over the past years and have been subject to them along with the rest of our community. But the thing that I am really concerned about is how we got here in the first place and the fact that rates were so low for so long. And it is just really important to me that we are not unduly burdening future generations of Sitkans in the same way that we are having to deal with right now. And so I don't know what that number is, but I feel very strongly about speaking up for the young people that are going to be living in this community and having to make the same difficult decisions that we're making right now and not putting them in a worse spot.
I mean, that, again, going back 25 years, we had a big fight here about harbor rates in the like 98, 99, and a couple of us wanted to raise rates, and they were really low, and we got knocked down hard because there was, and we were saying, guys, we need to put some away, and that was back when the state was just about to give it to us, and the writing was on the wall that we weren't, the state was going to give us to us, but they weren't going to give me money to work on them, and we had a full room of people yelling at us, saying, "You can't. You're going to put us at it." I mean, and it's exactly what Katie was talking about. If we'd even gone up, you know, just a few cents a foot, then we would have had 10, 15 years of, it's like, you know, it was, and so I mean, it's that balancing act. I have one actual line item question. I'm assuming the $2.5 million for Blatchley is put in away for savings for the project in '29. Is that right?
So the school plan has not been updated yet either. It's I actually meant to talk about that on one of my slides. I did have some lines and I realized I forgot. So the process that we go through to develop the plan for the schools is a little bit different because we have an agreement that requires some meetings with the superintendent and then for that plan to go through the school board as well. So there are actually fairly significant updates to that plan. You just won't see them for about another month until that work session with the school district.
Yeah, this is our first year of doing the capital plan with the school district. So what we're doing right now is what I, Brooke, and other city staff did with the superintendent just a couple days ago, sitting in the office, going through their capital list, going through the risk scores, seeing where everything is, and putting that list together. And then Deidre is going to take that to the school board, and they will go through this exact same process. If that capital list looks good to them, then it'll get incorporated into ours and presented along with the budget.
We funded a lot last year for schools. Were we able to execute on many of them?
So those appropriations were FY26. So we literally, that funding, we were just able to access it. And so there's some progress, but not much. And that's pretty normal for appropriations that are that new. They do have everybody knows there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the school buildings. They are very expensive projects. So there's a lot of conversations taking place about how you save up the money and figure out how to do that when there's less support from the state.
Yes, I remember that from last year's budget cycle about bonding. So the more information, the earlier you have it is great on that, because it's been a little bit since we've taken out a bond for schools, and that'll be another conversation, or these early meetings, December of next year, guys. Scotty, you haven't talked about the library yet.
I want to talk about, I think it's the enterprise funds is what got us here in the first place, because they're more concerned with the end result of each fiscal year than planning downstream for the rest of the infrastructure. And then just by that, being able to say that we're in the black, and then that's how the harbors were diminished. And now I could talk about the library. Had a good day at the library where we looked at the humidifying, the lack of humidifying in the library. And I heard back from the Library Commission that they're just thrilled with how the assembly went there and actually could visualize their dilemmas. But we didn't get to talk about a couple of the other things there, but.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't join you on that one. I wanted to hear your insight, but holiday season, pretty busy for me. Got to catch the king salmon when they're running.
And you did? You caught today?
A couple shakers, but
On the topic of, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say real quick, I echo what people have said. This is very nice, all the work that you did. It's very open and honest and transparent. I really like the printouts that are big. But yeah, thank you. That's all I was going to say.
Topic of rates for the harbors. There was a study that was published 2024, I believe, that talked about rates and where we're at and what would need to happen to make an adjustment to get kind of on track. So that's, was it 2024? Yeah. So there's some good insight in that document. It's available on the Harbor's website. We have a bunch of projects here. There's a lot going on. Staffing, I'm going to talk about. Do we have the people to do this work? To do the maintenance side of this is all capital. Maintenance workers, but also within our project management staff. And yeah, can it be done?
Do you want me to say no? I mean, it's there's a limit to what we can achieve in a year, and we've talked about this a lot too. I think just a couple days ago, we're like, the school district's got 30 projects on there. Are you really going to get 30 projects done in a year? No, we're not going to get 30 projects done in a year. And even if we tripled the size of staff, we're not going to get those 30 projects or these 540 projects, whatever we have on here. But it's not just city staff too, it's local contractor capacity as well. I mean, we've got a very limited pool to choose from, and trying to pull others in from outside of the island is very hard. So that's part of the strategy, right? Is which ones are we going to execute, which ones are funded, and which ones do we have the capacity to do? If it was 30 small projects that take a week or two to do, yeah, absolutely, we'll get all those done. But as Brooke mentioned earlier, the airport is a big one, and it's pulled a lot of resources for that one big project. So, you know, it's not easy for me to just say, yes, we have enough people, or no, we don't have enough people. It really is project dependent, and what the size of the project is and how many of them are out there.
Thank you, because what we've done so far tonight is kind of look at the numbers and the costs, and you know the timing of how much money can we save at what time to get to that project cost when we, you know, when the risk matrix says, but that staffing side is also critical to having things get achieved, and I trust that you'll let us know when we get into a pinch point and when we just don't have enough, or we would need to move to, you know, consultants to administer some of this work. So we'll listen if you ever want to bring that to us.
So we definitely still have time as an assembly to continue to talk. Seems like the conversation seems like we were satisfied with the meeting tonight. I hope for staff that was in the room, I hope that this was helpful to kind of hear some of the assembly's thoughts this early in the process. Brooke, I hope it was helpful for you to start wrapping your head around this earlier than you normally do. I think if we can take smaller bites throughout the time as opposed to massive meetings where we become overwhelmed, it's helpful for us because while we live this world every day, we don't live it like you do. It's not forefront. We have to transition back and forth between our day jobs and then this other hat we wear. So I think smaller bites for me where I can digest in an hour to 2 hour work session works out really, really well. Because then we can go back and refine our thoughts as it comes up and have a time to sit down with John and you know, further help along the budget process. So this was definitely helpful for me. I don't know what I'll have as a follow-on from it, but it starts wrapping my head around where we're needing. Even JJ's comments of do we have enough staff? If we don't have staffing for the projects that we might need, that might be another way to save some rate effort. If we can't realistically achieve it in the time frame, then maybe it doesn't need to be on there. Because I don't think, you know, our town's appetite for rate increases is small, but the appetite for additional city staff, I don't know why engineers always get picked on, but that seems to be the one. That's also the one holding up a lot of these projects, I would assume, is a lack of engineering to make all of them go at the same time. So yeah, this was helpful for me. We can definitely continue our conversation tonight. I know there's a final notes slide. Brooke is ready to go home, but Sarah's still got, what do we got? Sarah, another couple hours still? Yeah? Filibuster, just sit up here and I'll talk as long as need be. And it's getting dark. Tor's got to go home. Any other thing from Assembly? Well, we have department heads here, staff here.
I'll just say that yes, appetite for rate increases is small, and I understand that. Appetite for functional services and a working city is very high. And I just want to emphasize to anyone who is listening, and also, you know, ourselves, is that we have to pay for that. And I think we all understand that we are in an era of declining support from the state and the feds, and we have to fund our priorities, and it's on all of us to communicate that effectively to our citizens. But that's what I understood at AML, so.
Yeah, I agree. Earlier you made a comment of, you know, the lack of rate increases put us in this spot, and I don't want to do the same. You know, 10 years or so in the early 2000s without any rate increases, it was great then, but it hurts now. And I hope that my kid will stay here, and I look at those decisions with that mindset as well. So I agree. I want my toilet to dispose of waste, and I want my lights to turn on when I flip the switch. Stub toes hurt, so.
You know, one thing that Thor was teaching me the other night is that we're at 6 mills, and Juneau just voted to come down to 9 mills as far as home ownership, and then all the homes we have that don't have kids or even stay here in the winter, you know, and just something to think about for me as far as the rates. But then we got to pay more for eggs and all of that, but it's all connected.
Per child property tax break? I'm in. Kevin's really in.
Well, you know, and that comes at too for my neighborhood with so many grandmothers raising grandkids, and they can't get food stamps to raise the grandkids, you know, and we got all this, so.
Nobody's getting them now. Well, maybe they are.
Got a comment question. I think it could be helpful when we see the packet come through for the budget to have the resource proposals organized, what is capital and what is operational. I think it fielded some questions from my neighbor here last year when we were trying to kind of balance that budget during that final meeting, and what was actually going to balance the budget and what was coming from that public infrastructure sinking fund. Being organized by strategic plan was also nice. I think what would make a difference in that yearly fund. Thank you.
Brooke, you got one more slide you need to go over with us? Did you already go over that one? Well, it seems like forever ago now, huh? Well, if there's nothing else from the assembly, I guess we would move on to our wrap-up item. So if you have any comments, I know this was a very open conversation right now, but if you have any comments relating to the budget, this would be item B on our list. Now would be the time for that. Okay, great. Then moving on this evening to persons to be heard, public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual. Okay, and adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, Assembly and staff. We are adjourned.